Cambridge Analytica went bankrupt, of course. We've seen massive amounts of lawsuits as a result, which are actually still taking place. And all of us that were involved in exposing the scandal have really been subjected to a lot of threats and difficulties. And thank you, Grace. It is great to be here. I'm very grateful to Laurie for putting on this really important event, screening this film at such a crucial time to remind people what has been happening. And going back to like what has been taking place since The Great Hack came out, we've also seen the same people deployed for Trump in 2020.
She's going ahead and doing her presentation. I'm recording it and we'll send it out to your people.
In 2020, and in the run-up to January 6th, where we saw the same kinds of data operations taking place. So it is no surprise that we're now looking at similar, well, actually not even similar, like way worse situation in 2024. I look back at 2016 at the kinds of rhetoric that Cambridge Analytica were sharing and the crudeness of the tools that they used compared to what we are dealing with now with AI and the extent to which data is being harvested, shared, sold, and used to drive surveillance influence operations. And it's really very scary. I think how the speed at which things are advancing. Every single day that goes by, we see new AI tools that are being rolled out, which have even greater sophistication. Now, I don't want to be overly alarmist, because actually I think it's important to, we should not feel overwhelmed. We are, there is a significant challenge, but that doesn't mean that we can't operate within this system to face that challenge and to take it on. And I think you're right. We need to be talking about making things like data harvesting and sharing illegal with privacy legislation in the United States. California has brought in, that's one of the things that's happened since Cambridge Analytica and The Great Hack, is that California has privacy legislation, but other states, of course, do not. And there is no federal privacy legislation to protect Americans across the country. And the data gathering has only accelerated. I would also say that even in other countries where there is privacy legislation, this generally is not being used to stop people's data being collected, but is more about controlling the use of the data, which doesn't necessarily help to stop these operations happening. Why has there not been more privacy legislation? Unfortunately, these big tech companies spend billions on lobbyists that are pushing for the liberalization of regulation around technologies and to be able to get more and more access to data, not less. And I would say also governments are not necessarily motivated towards protecting our privacy either, because for policing, for all sorts of governmental uses, it's helpful for them to be able to access our data. So unfortunately, it really takes an awful lot of pressure on policymakers, and also voting for the right policymakers who actually care about these issues. And I think a lot of the time we've been putting people in power that don't necessarily really value privacy. So I think one of the challenges is also raising this debate, having these kinds of events where we highlight the importance of data, because I think people hear about data and algorithms and they don't really necessarily understand what that means and why it affects them. They think, well, this is just targeted advertising. Maybe it's going to, sell me some shoes or something. But they don't necessarily understand how. So you're getting a bit of feedback there, so I went quiet. But they don't actually know how that affects them and how it affects elections. Some people are quite happy to have their data being used because they feel like, well, it's not me who's jeopardized here. But unfortunately, it is the mass use of the data that enables the kind of voter suppression that we've been seeing. And everybody making their data available enables that that targeting of those people who are very vulnerable. So we are all complicit if we are allowing our data to be collected in these ways. And we should all be doing, I would say that these big tech platforms like Facebook and Twitter and all of them, they don't do enough, and they don't enable enough ability for us to opt out or, prevent our data being used. But we also need to actually engage ourselves in being proactive to deny them data where the tools do exist. So that's really important as a part of this. Right, let me look at some of these other questions. Are both of the major US political parties close to equal in their use of data? This is a very good question. I would say both use data extensively, but not necessarily in the same ways. I would say that the Democrats do respect privacy more in the types of tools that they have been putting out, the kinds of apps that they use, but they are all trying to harvest as much data as legally possible, in the United States, because of that is the legal framework within which they are fighting the election. So if it's legal, they're going to do it, and to the greatest extent of the law. And I would say the main difference, so if you look at the data harvesting, for instance, that was used to elect Obama, and he did use micro-targeting. The type of tools that were used by Obama and by Clinton did not do the same thing that the type of tools that elected Trump did. Let me explain this a little bit more, because I think while I don't agree with any of this data harvesting and micro-targeting, I would argue that the type of what you're going to do with the data matters. So the problem for me with Trump and the ways in which the Republican Party has been using data, not only are they mass sharing very, very personal data that has, that is indicative of people's mental health, that is it used with Cambridge Analytica. One of the things that they were trying to do is to work out how to best target fear-driven messaging. And they realized that if they knew who was a neurotic, that these people are more susceptible to anxiety. And so they were using neuroticism as a measure of anxiety in order to target basically conspiracy theories and false information. And so I would say that, and using that for voter suppression. So neuroticism as a measure of essentially mental health, and targeting like some of the most vulnerable people in society with the most disturbing conspiracy theories. That is not the way the Democrats have been doing their data operations. It goes without saying, but I would say mass harvesting of data anyway in these kinds of ways is really problematic. But yeah, I think one of the problems is that, after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, people were saying, well, all of these companies do this. It's a mass practice. Well, yes, they're all using data, but how you use data needs to be very heavily regulated in order that we're not exploiting, people's vulnerabilities, that there isn't a possibility of, gaining, really sensitive data on people's mental health, people's, financial status, whether they are addicts, whether they have had, you know, um, personal crises that can be manipulated. And quite frankly, the types of data that we saw during the Cambridge Analytica scandal being shared, very disturbing. And one of the difficulties as well, because Cambridge Analytica used this ocean personality test, they were looking at neuroticism, as I said. Well, this is actually a personality test that's used for all sorts of purposes. There's nothing nefarious about the ocean personality test as such. It's what they were using it for targeting these conspiracy theories that became really problematic. And they were using it um, as a lens through which to capture who is suffering from extreme anxiety. Now, a lot of people asked, well, to what extent did this sway an election? And I think one of the key factors is really about, well, if you know in a particular swing state how many people are neurotic, and you know that you can activate those people, that small number of people, well, that might be enough to sway the election, because they realized that they could activate people who were neurotics by about 30% more using fear-based messaging. So I think that we don't want to make exaggerated claims that everybody will suddenly vote for Trump if they put out conspiracy theories. But the key is that data and trying to identify, well, who will be swayed. And we've seen increasingly in recent years this trend where anxiety has become the key way of moving people. And apps like Facebook and Twitter and so on, the way the algorithms work is all about how to get people to share. And the ways in which people are motivated to share is built into the algorithm. It is all about anxiety, unfortunately. So these apps, by their very design, and both make us more anxious, make us more divided, and make us more likely to share this kind of material. And that also makes that type of material, so things that are paranoid and conspiracy theories and disinformation, far more likely to make money on the platforms. So it financially incentivizes the production of this kind of very misleading and hate-driven messaging. Christy is asking if it's a civic education issue. Definitely. And I think that, there's a lot of different solutions to this. There is no one solution. We do need privacy legislation. We need regulation of these kinds of lobbying, forms of lobbying, to avoid the problems of, money buying these kinds of political issues, support for these political issues and things. But yes, of course, there need to be civic education solutions, also local journalism, and journalism in general. One of the problems with AI is that it is threatening journalism organizations, like the actual, good quality journalism is going to be losing an awful lot of money. There are already mass layoffs at many journalism outlets, because it's going to be more and more easy for articles just to be generated en masse using AI. Journalists are going to be losing jobs. You don't need as big a team. So I think there is a real threat to journalism too. Laurie has a question. What is Laurie's question?
She has to unmute herself on Zoom.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, Laurie.
I'll take the mic. You just use the mic on here.
Oh, so I'll just talk here. Can you hear me?
No.
Oh.
The lower left corner, unmute.
It's not going
On the
I did.
It's going to feedback.
I
You
did
have to-
unmute.
No, you're not unmuted, Lori. You're still.
Scenario, unless she's outside this room, that she doesn't.
What?
feedback.
You can go outside the room.
Yeah,
So it won't.
Go outside the room?
There's no. It's
He was
Right.
doing it from the hallway, I
it's a
think.
feedback.
With the computer.
With the computer.
I can hear you, Laurie.
It's the feedback, sorry. I'll get on Zoom there and be on Zoom.
So can you hear me, Emma?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you, Laurie.
You
What's
can't
your
hear
question?
her, so,
What? This?
no,
What?
you have to be able to hear her through here.
Can you hear
So-
me now?
Yep.
No.
Yes, we can hear you. It's all good.
But we can't hear Emma.
I can't hear Emma here.
I'm speaking. I'm here.
Oh dear. Well, I should go where Scott is, right? Well, Scott's wearing these earbuds.
Well, maybe I'll give you one. If you had one.
All right.
If you have a question, you can ask it, Laurie.
If you have a question, go ahead and ask it right now.
Okay, so Emma, from watching People You May Know, I'm aware of the, the way that Steve Bannon and others are interfering, are reaching out and manipulating the evangelicals, churches that are ready to hear. I can't hear you, but I'm saying that I'm interested to know two things. One is the people in the movie The Great Hack, how many of them are busy with still doing things like Alexander Nix or Brittany Kaiser or others? Are they really operating under a different name? And then another part is I've seen the huge rise in Christian nationalism, and I really think that whole organization, everything you put forward in People You May Know has become much bigger. And we showed a movie and some clips last time, and I was aware that it's gotten very, very activated, the Christian nationalism, and it's incorporated in this Project 2025. So I definitely want to hear you. I've now said my piece, but I'd like to get feedback. So I'd like to know where I go to hear her. What?
Thank you, Laurie. I have just dropped into the chat a little video about how Cambridge Analytica were working on the 2020 election, which I think will be very interesting to all of you, because this, in terms of the people from the Great Hack from Cambridge Analytica and how they were continuing to work, they absolutely, several of them were involved in the 2020 election, and the same kinds of data operations being deployed. The kind of people we're talking about do not suddenly change their professions and do something else. So we have seen also Alexander Nix continuing to work on social media advising. The problem is that a lot of it is, hidden, and is very much, they're doing a good job of trying to cover their tracks. And we really need, good research and journalism that is going into looking at what they're doing still, as well as all the other many influence firms. We have seen an uptick in like journalists actually reporting on this phenomenon. And I think that's really important. We've seen great reporting that has also exposed the hacking firm that Cambridge Analytica worked with, a group called Team Jorge, which I can share an article with you all about if that's helpful. But these are a hacking group which was working with Cambridge Analytica, which also has gone on to work on horrifyingly misleading political campaigns all around the world. And there are many of these kinds of firms. It's not even just this one. So if you look at political consulting in the United States, it's horrifyingly corrupt. And there are a lot of these companies that are both working in politics in the United States, but also working for foreign governments or foreign politicians running their campaigns. And so I would say that, like the worry is also, who these other,
because you're a co-host, you just give it
and the influence that has. We really don't want people working in our elections who are also doing, dodgy campaigns in Eastern Europe in order to, bring about the rise of the far right and so forth there. Like, if you look at the ways in which these kinds of campaigns are being funded, what those people are doing with their money in the rest of the time as well, you can see that very wealthy individuals are influencing politics in several countries. And that brings us to Bannon, of course. Many of you will know the work that he's doing across Europe as well as elsewhere. Sorry, it's a lot of talking.
So can I
don't know what that is.
Can we signal that I can ask a question again? So can you hear me? Can you hear me, Emma?
Yes, hi.
Emma, I'd like to ask you, what do you know about hacking and false information like that with Russia?
Well, Russia has been behind an awful lot of hacks in the last few years. There has been a massive increase, particularly with the war in Ukraine, of Russian hackers that have been targeting both governments, traditional targets, but also people like journalists, academics, NGOs, activists, because, in order to do that, they are essentially putting out information that they gather within a false frame, within a conspiracy theory that aims to undermine the work that those organizations are doing. That is designed to make them look like they're working with governments, that they can't be trusted. And this is part of the overall influence operation that is running to undermine both support for Ukraine, but also to support Trump, to support these far-right individuals that are trying to disrupt democracy. So the worry is that, a lot of this is more challenging to tackle than deep fakes, for example, because if you hack someone, then you manage to get personal data. It's terrifying, it's terrorizing, it has a really strong psychological impact on them and their ability to work. So it has a silencing effect. It also has an effect on the perceived credibility of the material that's then circulated. So often the hacked material then is put out through partisan and maybe pro-Russian outlets, but it's turned into a, claims that it is these people are working with the government to secretly silence you or to secretly do something. And because there's real information at the heart, and yet that's been put into like a larger conspiracy theory, it's very difficult for the public to actually look at that and say, well, is that real or isn't it? Because bits of it, like that, there's like a core that is maybe factual, for example. So but then the story around it, the context, of course, is misleading and false. And so you end up with a very confusing kind of product which looks like journalism and yet has not been fact checked, and it's been put out through an ideological lens that is designed to advance an enemy's interests and lie about what our governments are doing or what this entity is doing, what that journalist is doing, and in order to discredit their work. And I think while we're sort of used to seeing governments hacked and politics and politicians hacked, it's really kind of new to be seeing this targeting truth tellers and journalists and NGOs and people who are fighting for the rights of human rights causes and things like this. And that has been a trend we've seen massively increasing in the last 2 years, with people being doxxed, for example, their private details being put out into the public, and then they get targeted by far-right groups turning up at their home, pictures of their children circulating and things like this. And it makes it very, very difficult for people who are trying to put out journalism that matters, for them to do their jobs and to feel safe. And overall, that has a massive silencing effect that is very worrying. I'm actually more worried about this than I am about things like deep fakes, because it is so much harder to challenge. And the destruction of trust in good people, the people who will provide the compass to help us through this crisis, is far more dangerous than I think deceptive communications that can be debunked or challenged. If we lose faith in the debunkers, then that's a real problem. I hope that answers your question, Laurie.
She can't see you, Laurie.
Oh, that's a shame.
Lori can't just get on her own computer on her own Zoom link, like.
So someone is asking, what about laws? There are a lot of new legislation that's being developed around, both preventing hacking, but also AI and deep fakes. So Biden has brought in new rules to stop deep fakes and to sort of try to respond to this, but it does need something more than presidential directives and things like this. To we need to actually have a proper set of legislation introduced on this, rather than things that can be changed easily between different administrations. Because the problem is, if Trump does get in, and I think that is the risk, all of what Biden has been trying to do with his efforts to deal with deep fakes and so on are all going to be undone. I mean, that's the not even the half of it, of course, with Project 2025, as Laurie said. But we need to be really thinking about how what kinds of legislation are really going to be effective here. And I think one of the problems I think is that Democrats also have not been rigorous enough in pushing for these kinds of privacy changes, because they also want to use data in order to micro-target, maybe not quite in such evil ways, but still, it's, you know, they are invested in the continuation of that, most of them. Is there any more questions, or should we, is it time to wrap up? Maybe people are getting tired. Can we fund? I mean, I'm always looking for funders for my research. Publicize. Definitely, I think there needs to be a lot more effort to raise people's awareness. I was horrified at the, you know, lack of mobilization and organization around changing this at the time of the Cambridge Analytica revelations. We were a, you know, a disparate collection of individuals trying to do something. And I'm just an academic, like pretty normal person, you know. I don't have, you know, loads of money, and I don't have like an NGO to sort of mobilize a campaign and things like this. It was very, very difficult. You're trying to build allies. I've tried to build relationships to try to get the message out, but I think we need
Emma?
Grace.
The computer's still muted.
I turned it off.
Laurie, do you have another
It's
question?
unmuted.
Hmm?
It's unmuted.
Emma, can you hear us?
Hi, yes.
Yeah.
Emma?
Yes. Hi.
She can hear you right now. Just ask your question.
Emma, this
Hi.
is Lori.
Hi, Laurie.
And I can't hear you, but what I'm hearing right now, and I want to repeat back what I understood, is that both Republicans and Democrats are wanting to use data. The Republicans have been less ethical in some of their data and have really been using it very seriously. I would say that this is also connected with Christian nationalism, where you believe that you are an agent of God to elect President Trump. Therefore, you are justified to reach out to the vulnerable in this way. And so that worries me. And so anyway, I just wanted to repeat that part. And then with respect to Russia, Putin has a lot of very personal reasons for wanting Trump to get elected and has known him for many, many years. All right. And I learned from Brett Kimberlin, who you know as do I, that Putin's putting over $1 billion into winning. So we have these significant threats. So I think your idea of educating people with this course on how to really determine fake news or figure it out better is a really good choice. And for people to donate to that, as well as in addition to the donation that I have done, which is only a start, to bring this information forward. And we still have some time because we're not right at election time. We still have time to have an effect. So I hope I've understood you accurately. Have I? You can just nod,
Yes,
or
I
I
would
can't hear
say,
you. Okay, thank you.
yes, you have. I
all
would
right.
add, if I may, I'd like to add that, you know, the Russians obviously are also pushing this Christian nationalism. And I think that's really key too. This has been a part of Russian influence operations for decades. They've had
Really?
Alexander Dugin coming over to Texas giving talks as early as I think it was 2009. So this is not a new thing. The attempts to use Christian nationalism to influence US culture through, because, you know, Russia is far right. It's very right wing, far right Christian and quite fascistic in its political orientation, and especially some of the key leaders who work on information operations there. Those folks have been pushing out that message. Alexander Dugin is one of the key people who has been, behind a lot of these kinds of tactics. And okay, I wanted to say that, like, that doesn't mean that everybody who is a Christian nationalist in the United States realizes this, of course. So I would say that one of the problems is that, there has been an awful lot of effort by Western, American political activists to push out these kinds of narratives too, and it suits both Russia's interests as well as the political right.
What stories are those? I'm confused.
So the Christian nationalist narratives and
in the U.S.
political organizing in the U.S. It's something that obviously also advances domestic interests, and the interests of the Republican Party and their activists, but also is advantageous to the Russians. So you're seeing a confluence of those interests. And that means that while some of them may be working together, there also are a lot of mobilization where there's an overlap. And Russia sees this as a cultural, it's using this kind of cultural oneness. We are all the same, in a way that is also very racist and exclusionary. And is trying to reshape American culture around its agenda. I'm going to drop the, thank you for highlighting again the course. I'm going to drop my bio and a lot of information just into the chat so that people can access that course. And it's not allowing me to because it says there's too many links, but let me see if I can remove some of it, and then there we go. Maybe that'll work. Is that short enough? But I want to share the resources with people so that they can go to that course, and maybe it's easy to do that. There we go. Okay, so now you have the course, so people can, well, I wanted to put it in the chat because then you can click on the link and that makes it easy. And there's a coupon code. So you can copy and paste it out of the chat then, and it makes it a little easier for people. But maybe Scott can also distribute it widely.
That sounds good to me.
I also include there my Patreon. Let me see if I can give you my Patreon, because that is where I invite people to follow my work. And you can also support me with a small amount of money if you wish to help me keep going.
Something.
Yeah, because I put out occasional updates and on the work that I'm doing and blogs and things like that through the Patreon. And it can be as cheap as $3 a month. So it's not going to break the bank, or you can obviously donate more. But, if it's helpful, I've also included free resources there too. So you can even join as a free member, although you won't get quite so many exciting updates from me. Thank you, though. It's been lovely meeting you all. Oh, and that's my Patreon. So you can do the free member where you can access a small amount of resources, but then you can, if you scroll down, choose a membership that is going to give you more information and more access and just help me more every month.
And my hope is that some of this funding will help you explore even more what's going on this year.
Exactly. It helps me to keep going with producing articles, with educating people, with making things out for free as well, to accessible.
And discovering some things that are new too in your research. And you're researching with another person too.
I
You
have a
mentioned
lot of
that to me.
collaborators. I have a lot of collaborators. I'm working on other films as well. I'm working on a new article which is going to be looking at the way in which Michael Flynn is working with a particular organization to put out conspiracy theories in the 2024 election. I haven't talked about that much today, but that's coming, and the article is nearly finished. So hopefully that'll be out very soon. And that is a deep investigation into this particular influencer who has been working for the last 20 years. So it's a big organization that has been working on the Trump campaign and generating millions at the same time as having a global reach. And it's but one that's barely been written about in the press. So if you want to support the work that I'm doing, I really appreciate it. And thank you for following everything that I'm doing.
So we are scheduled to show People You May Know next week. And
yes, that was another one I was researcher for.
And it might be good if we showed maybe part of it to allow more room for question and answer at the end. I don't know.
I need to look at my schedule to see if I can do another, depending on the day.
Right. Okay,
so
it's the same Friday.
I need to check my schedule though.
Okay, good.
Sorry, but
right.
I would love to. If we can make the timing work out, then I would love to join you again for that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you, Laurie.
Good.
I really appreciate you sharing all this important work with everybody. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Everybody's clapping.
Bye.
Okay, you take
Thank you,
care.
everyone.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Laura, you can come back out here.
Hold on a second. Yes?
You can come back out here.
I will.
And just put the camera on. Yeah, which let's see where reviews. Put the camera on here.
Test. All right.
Yeah, we got to. Yeah, I think we got to definitely do a test because when we had it coming through. Oh, we'll talk about it later.
Thank you. Can everybody still hear me right now? Online?
Yes.
All right. You pin this right there. Or is it because you're connected?
I'm pinned on there. If Lori goes and sits there.
Hey, Lori, can you come back? Lori. Lori.
Oh, while we're waiting. Hey, everybody. I see we still have about 18 of you left. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I think we're going to wind down. So I will see you tomorrow night on The Awakening World. We have a wonderful, wonderful show planned with Kristen Hoffman and a lot of music. A new musical artist, Allison Eden, will join us, and of course, Omar Shar. And it's all about celebrating World Oceans Day. So I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow night.
Can you help me get the Zoom thing again then?
Lori, are you still planning on? I'm kind of wrapping up here. Are you still?
I was going to, and then.
Oh yeah. Do you want to wrap up with us?
Oh, I guess Lori's going to talk a little bit more. All right. Well, we actually have Lori with us. Let me. So, what would you like to share, Lori?
Well, I'm just very happy with everybody who's chosen to be here.
So I'll tell you. Okay, and let me make this larger. There we go. Lots of people are saying thank you.
Yes, and I would really recommend looking at her course so that you could understand more what's going on, because there are a lot of people trying to affect our election. And I know you've you'd like to feel that I'm sure that our expression is a true, honest expression of American people, that the results, whatever they are.
Are
That's
there-
what we hope for.
Are there any final thoughts or questions in the chat box? Let's see if I can make this larger.
Could people hear me?
Yes,
Hmm.
people can hear you. People are trying to sign up for her Patreon and having trouble, so we'll check on that. I will send out the recording because I recorded Emma's talking after the film, so I'll send that out and make sure that we have the right Patreon page for everybody.
Wonderful. And so, I mean, basically what she was talking about is AI and data gathering is getting bigger. The same people that were in the movie you saw are still operating. That we really have a lot to do to try to make our elections fair and clean. And not distorted. Okay, and we really appreciate you being here. And if you're trying to sign up on the Patreon site, thank you, because she'll come up with more stuff within even a month.
And yes, you can. We will share the recording out with people of what Emma shared. I'll make sure that everybody gets that. I'll put it on YouTube, and there'll be a YouTube link, and I'll provide it tomorrow night. Remind me during the Awakening World, and I'll also give it to Lori in the Sunrise Center.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow night.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Mhm. Mm.
They were saying it's the core